There's a lot wrong with modern day trucking, but when I look at the problems, the major problems, none of these problems are caused by drivers. The problems are all created from either government overregulation or government inaction. These are the 5 biggest problems as I see it. Number 1, no overtime pay for drivers. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act was brought into law, and that act stipulated that all the workers would be paid overtime after 40 hours, except truck drivers. Well, today's economy is far different. The workforce is far different. It's time to bring this act up to date. It's been 85 years. Things have changed drastically. There is now no need, no excuse not to be able to pay overtime to truck drivers. They need to fix that legislation and get rid of the Fair Labor Standards Act from 1938 as it reads, because truck drivers deserve to be paid overtime. Number 2, the ELD. Now, we all recognize that there needs to be some way to track drivers' hours of service and different things like that. And the ELD, for the most part, does that. But it is too finite, it is too regulated, it is too fixed a system for the give and take of modern everyday trucking. There is no flexibility with the ELD. It's been shown that it's not solving accident problems. If anything, it's creating them. They need to build more flexibility into the ELDs. They said they were going to do this. They've put that on the back burner. It's time to fix that and build in more flexibility so these things work the way they should. Number 3, the hours of service. I think everyone can agree that a 70-hour work week is an awfully long work week, and it's a mandatory work week of 70 hours for some drivers. Now, I've had lots of drivers tell me that they need to work 70 hours just to make enough money to pay their bills. Well, if they paid truckers overtime, certainly that would help offset that problem, but it still boils down to the way drivers are paid. Paid by the mile is an outdated system. They need to revise the pay system and pay drivers by the hour or by the mile-hour combination, something so that all drivers are being paid for all the time they work. There's no dead time. So they need to revise the pay system. And then drivers could work 40-hour weeks, get paid overtime if they went over the 40, but still make enough money in that 40 hours to be able to pay the bills. Now, some trucking companies too use the ELD as an efficiency tool to try to squeeze the most miles out of drivers if they possibly can. That also needs to stop because they're putting tired drivers out on the road just to make a little more money. That's unsafe. That needs to stop as well. But we need to revise the whole hours of service system and not make a 70-hour work week mandatory. GP Transco is a mid-sized carrier based out of Joliet, Illinois, but they hire out of all 48 states. New drivers, first-year drivers there make between $80,000 and $95,000 a year. They pay really well. They've got a great benefit package, 401k with a match. They run all new equipment. GP Transco is a good, solid carrier. They've got lots of freight. Check them out at gptransco.com. Problem number 4, load brokers. If the government had dealt with load brokers 30 or 40 years ago when they should have, we wouldn't have the problem and the mess that we have today. Today's trucking industry has to deal with tens of thousands of different load brokers, and all sorts of which pay late or don't pay at all or cut their rate. It's a mess. Now, the load brokers have gained so much power now that their body, their association that they formed, the TIA they like to call themselves, because they don't like to use the word load broker. They're fighting having to reveal all their numbers. What the shipper pays them basically is what they don't want to pay. And the government is calling on them to be transparent. They've done this once before, and all the TIA did, all the load brokers did, was find a workaround to that so they wouldn't have to reveal all their numbers. And of course, load brokers don't want to be transparent, because if the truck drivers knew all the true numbers, it would be really difficult to cheat them. And cheating them is what they're all about. So if the government really wants to give a boost to the trucking industry and really wants to get rid of a problem in the supply chain, the best thing they could do is bring in legislation to ban load brokers altogether. It would solve a lot of problems. Number 5, and the biggest one, deregulation. In 1980, Jimmy Carter introduced the Motor Carrier Act, and the idea behind it was to deregulate the trucking industry, and it would save consumers money on goods that truckers hauled, and it did that very well. The problem was that it turned the trucking industry into a quagmire, into a race for the bottom, as everyone chopped the rates to try to get all the freight. The mega carriers came in and beat everybody on the rates, and now we're in the situation today with deregulation that there simply are too many trucks for the amount of freight that's out there. The mega carriers and other competition have driven the rates into the ground, and the end result is just cheap freight. Everyone's hauling cheap freight, and no one's really making any money at the deal anymore. What they need to do is introduce some sort of a partial re-regulation to solve this problem so the trucking industry isn't driving itself into the ground, because that's literally what it's doing now. As truck drivers, we haven't created any of these problems, but we have to deal with them every day. If government really wants to solve what's going on in the trucking industry, they need to make it a top priority. Put it on the front burner and start paying more attention to it, rather than having it on the back burner where it's been all along and continues to stay. We found out through the pandemic just how important truck drivers really are. The government needs to pay attention to this, because the whole economy is in real trouble if the truck drivers aren't working. Let me tell you my story about deregulation. When the industry deregulated in 1980, one of my dreams had always been to have my own authority. So when I went into the Ministry of Transport, I didn't know what to expect. An inspector sat down with me, helped me through the paperwork. It was so easy to get my own operating authority. I was thrilled. It was inexpensive. It was a great experience, frankly, and I came out of there really excited. And I got my own truck, and I got my own trailer, and I started trucking, and the rates were really good. I could go where I wanted. I could command the rates that I wanted, and it was really, really good. But back then, I had no idea, I don't think anybody really did, had any idea of how badly deregulation would eventually affect the whole industry and literally turn it on its head. And that's the point that we're at today. It started out as a really good thing, and it's ended up as a mess. So that's my story on how I got my operating authority. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, stick with trucking as long as you possibly can, as long as it's paying the bills, because it really is a good job. I'll see you on the back haul.